Michigan Early Literacy Collaborative, 2015. This module addresses Common Core State Standard L.1.4b. Readers can use frequently occurring affixes as a clue to the meaning of a word. In the lesson provided in this module, the student learning goal is I can use affixes as a clue to the meaning of a word. As students learn to read, it is important for them to be able to recognize common affixes added to words. It is also important for them to be able to understand how an affix affects the meaning of the root word. This standard addresses a language and vocabulary skill. Students must become word solvers. In their book, The Continuum of Literacy Learning by Gay-Sue Pinnell and Irene C. Fontes, they state, efficient word solvers look for and find patterns in the way words are constructed. Knowing spelling patterns helps children notice and use larger parts of the words, thus making word solving faster and easier. The goal of this language lesson is to develop our students' ability to identify affixes in root words and use the meaning of the affix to better understand the meaning of the whole word. Students will need to read words with affixes and decide what the author is trying to tell us by using the affix as a clue. An anchor chart with common affixes will be helpful as a reference for students. The approximate length of this lesson is 25 minutes. For this lesson, the students will need the affix anchor chart, the mentor text, Those Shoes by Meredith Boltz, which can be found in the first grade MESA writing units, Unit 4, a reader's notebook for taking notes and practicing the skill, as well as a student assessment. Here you see an example of the anchor chart used in this lesson. Here we have the tricky word strategy card that could be given to students during this lesson and for future use, as well as an example of a reader's notebook. As you begin the instructional sequence for this lesson, you will want some background information. You will want your readers to be reminded of what you've been working on up to this point. As readers, sometimes we're faced with a word we don't know. If that word contains an affix that we do know, we look for the base word and determine its meaning, and then use the known affix as a clue to the meaning of the unknown word. You will then remind your students, we've been learning many strategies to help us when we come to an unknown word while we are reading. Now that we are starting to read books that have more and more words and longer sentences, we are going to start seeing words that are longer and have more than one part. Today, we will review and practice reading words that have an affix and how we can use that affix to help us know the meaning of the word. This is important because the meaning of the root word changes with the affix. First, let me show you some slides about affixes to help you remember what we've been learning about these word parts. Here you will pause the lesson for a few minutes to show them this slide. After the slide, you might say, now that we have reviewed those word parts, we are going to apply it to our reading. Are you ready? Let's give it a try. The next part of our lesson is the teacher modeling. During this part of the lesson, the teacher will model for guided practice. You will use the anchor chart as a tool to review the process of determining meaning by looking at the affix. You might say, students, I have the book Those Shoes. We've read this as a mentor text. Watch me as I read from a sentence from the story. I'm going to show you how I use the affix to help me understand a word in the sentence. Watch me as I read the sentence all the way through. He says he's the fastest runner now, not me. Now, watch me as I reread the sentence and pause at the word with the affix. I'm going to use the process shown on our anchor chart. First, I'm going to identify the base word. Next, I'm going to find the affix. I'm going to look at my chart to help me figure out the meaning of the affix. Teacher would model this process. Now, I am going to use those clues to help me understand the meaning of the word as it's being used in this sentence. As a teacher, you may also choose to model writing the base word and affix either on another chart or in your own reader's notebook, as we are going to be asking students to do later in this lesson. You might also show with your words the pictures that you have in your mind, or make a quick sketch to show how this helps you understand the sentence. Next is guided practice. You might say, let's look at another sentence from our story, Those Shoes. You would then display a pre-selected sentence taken from the same recent read aloud, Those Shoes. Your sentence could be displayed on a sentence strip or written on another chart. Next, you would say, students, give me a thumbs up if you see a word in the sentence that has an affix. As your students go through this process, you might say, good, what word do you see? Yes, that word has an affix. We are going to go through the same process that I just showed you. I also want you to write this in your notebook to help you remember the process. Students could write the base word and affix separately in a reader's notebook to practice the segmenting process and to see the separate word parts. Next is active engagement. As a teacher, you've modeled the strategy, and now it's time for the children to practice. At this time, the teacher will give students a book that's at their reading level. Students will be asked to practice this process of using affixes as practiced in the lesson. Teachers will listen in to each of the students as they are practicing, helping and guiding as necessary. Encourage students to write the base words and affix in their notebook and to use the information on the anchor chart to help them determine the meaning of the affix. Be sure to watch carefully to see that your students are able to do this. Next is the link. The link reminds students of what to do during their independent reading time. You will review the definitions and processes on the anchor chart as well as the learning goal at this time. So readers, now anytime you are reading and you need to determine the meaning of a word with an affix, you can use this process. I'm going to give you your own copy of the anchor chart that we just used. I want you to glue it in your reader's notebook so you can review it anytime you need to remind yourself of the process. A teacher will want to individually assess each student on today's skill. This can be done through observation of student reading as well as by asking students to show their thinking, like on a sheet provided here. The teacher displays for each student a small passage. The teacher would ask each student to read the passage and demonstrate their ability to use the above practice process to help determine the meaning of the word or words that have an affix. On this slide you will find this assessment. On the next few slides you will see some resources. There are resources to help the teacher as well as students. Finally, at the bottom of this slide, you will find ideas to integrate this process throughout your day. L.1.4b. Use frequently occurring affixes as a clue to the meaning of a word.